August 3. My angel, Varvara Alexeyevna, I hasten to tell you, my little life, I have fresh hopes of something. But excuse me, my little daughter, you write, my angel, that I am not to borrow money. My darling, it is impossible to avoid it. Here I am in a bad way, and what if anything were suddenly amiss with you? You are frail, you know, so that's why I say we must borrow. Well, so I will continue. I beg to inform you, Varvara Alexeyevna, that in the office I am sitting next to Emelian Ivanovitch. That's not the Emelian Ilyitch whom you know. He is, like me, a titular councillor, and he and I are almost the oldest veterans in the office. He is a good-natured soul, an unworldly soul. He's not given to talking, and always sits like a regular bear. But he is a good clerk, and has a good English handwriting, and, to tell the whole truth, he writes as well as I do. He's a worthy man. I never was very intimate with him, but only just say good morning and good evening, or if I wanted the penknife, I would say, "Give me the penknife, Emelian Ivanovitch." In short, our intercourse was confined to our common necessities. Well, so he says to me today, "Makar Alexievitch, why are you so thoughtful?" I see the man wishes me kindly, so I told him. I said, "This is how it is, Emelian Ivanovitch." That is, I did not tell him everything, and indeed, God forbid, I never will tell the whole story because I haven't the heart to, but just told him something, that I was in straits for money, and so on. "You should borrow, my good soul," said Emelian Ivanovitch. "You should borrow. From Pyotr Petrovitch you might borrow. He lends money at interest. I have borrowed, and he asks a decent rate of interest, not exorbitant." Well, Varenka, my heart gave a leap. I thought and thought, maybe the Lord will put it into the heart of Pyotr Petrovitch, and in his benevolence he will lend me the money. Already I was reckoning to myself that I could pay the landlady, and help you, and clear myself all round. Whereas now it is such a disgrace, one is afraid to be in one's own place, let alone the jeers of our grinning jackanapes. Bother them! And besides, his Excellency sometimes passes by our table. Why, God forbid, he may cast a glance in my direction and notice I'm not decently dressed. And he makes a great point of neatness and tidiness. Maybe he would say nothing, but I would die of shame. That's how it would be. In consequence, I screwed myself up, and, putting my pride in my ragged pocket, I went up to Pyotr Petrovitch full of hope, and at the same time more dread than alive with suspense. But after all, Varenka, it ended in foolishness. He was busy with something, talking with Fedosey Ivanovitch. I went up to him sideways and pulled him by the sleeve, saying, "Pyotr Petrovitch, I say, Pyotr Petrovitch." He looked round, and I went on, saying, "This is how it is, 30 roubles," and so on. At first he did not understand me, and when I explained it all to him, he laughed and said nothing. I said the same thing again, and he said to me, "Have you got a pledge?" And he buried himself in his writing and did not even glance at me. I was a little flustered. "No," I said, "Pyotr Petrovitch, I've got no pledge." And I explained to him that when I got my salary I would pay him, would be sure to pay him. I should consider it my first duty. Then somebody called him. I waited for him. He came back and began mending a pen and did not seem to notice me. And I kept on with, "Pyotr Petrovitch, can't you manage it somehow?" He said nothing and seemed not to hear me. I kept on standing there. Well, I thought I would try for the last time, and pulled him by the sleeve. He just muttered something, cleaned his pen, and began writing. I walked away. You see, my dear girl, they may be excellent people, but proud, very proud. But I don't mind. We are not fit company for them, Varenka. That is why I have written all this to you. Emelian Ivanovitch laughed too, and shook his head, but he cheered me up, the dear fellow. Emelian Ivanovitch is a worthy man. He promised to introduce me to a man who lives in the Viborg side, Varenka, and lends money at interest too. He is some sort of clerk of the 14th class. Emelian Ivanovitch says he will be sure to lend it. Shall I go to him tomorrow, my angel, eh? What do you think? It is awful if I don't. My landlady is almost turning me out and won't consent to give me my dinner. Besides, my boots are in a dreadful state, my dear. I've no buttons either, and nothing else besides. And what if anyone in authority at the office notice such unseemliness? It will be awful, Varenka, simply awful. Makar Deyavushkin. Breaking in. It might be good to take stock concerning some names here. We've seen Pyotr Petrovitch before, 2 letters ago. He was the one who had apparently been the offender in a conflict that he settled with Aksent Osipovich in private. Private despite the peeping Makar having observed the episode through a crack in the door. More importantly, we need to keep the 2 Emelians distinct. Emelian Ivanovitch is the good, industrious clerk in Makar's office. Emelian Ilyich is the former clerk who has now turned into an unemployed drunkard. This is an interesting naming convention by Dostoevsky. One of these figures is a good influence upon Makar, while the other is a bad influence. Emelian Ivanovitch represents the status to which Makar hopes to return. Emelian Ilyich represents the status to which he may yet sink. End of comments.